Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
By design, science fiction is meant to push boundaries, and it does my heart good to see it happening in the filmmaking in our very own country. And if you can hear the sound of my voice, then you must be in the seats with, once again, as always, my name is David Voigt, and I am the host of this venerable podcast where we talk to a wide variety of industry professionals and not only pick their brain about their current projects, but state of the industry, state of storytelling in general, things going forward, the whole 9 yards, and what got them into the business too, because that's the kind of stuff we like to talk about. But don't forget to subscribe to our podcast over on Apple, on Spotify, and you can find everything archived over at youtube.com. Don't forget to follow us on the social media for all your latest updates, either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, just for all the latest news. And also, finally, and well, not most importantly, but importantly, please visit us at In the Seats at intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, updates on events, and so on and so forth from out the world of cinema. On today's episode, we have a very interesting guest because we're going to be talking about the film Parallel Minds. And we talked to writer-director Benjamin Ross Hayden, who has his film playing as a part of the Blood in the Snow Film Festival tonight at 9 p.m. on the Super Channel. So it's the last push, but go check it out because it's available there. It's also available on demand on various VOD platforms as well. But it's a science fiction story set in the near future, just in term, and it really tells the story of, you know, the power of sort of memories and the power of seeing. And it's one of those things that kind of, you know, it's going to replace, you know, it's one of those things that could even replace memories one day. It's a real interesting sort of jump and look at how technology is sort of being incredibly invasive with our own very thoughts and our minds. And it's a film that adds elements of Métis culture, and which makes sense because so is our writer and filmmakers of Métis descent, and he's a real interesting guy. And I hope you enjoy the conversation, and more importantly, check out the film too. All right, bye. No, I mean, obviously, first of all, thank you again, and obviously, congratulations on the film. I really enjoyed it, and I mean, I guess my first question is, because, you know, science fiction on a budget always is a bit of a struggle. I can imagine it any day. Can you walk me through sort of not only the inspiration for the story, but why you wanted to tell a science fiction story?
Right. So I guess to begin, I've always been fascinated with telling stories outside the present point of time.
Right.
And I find that when it comes to storytelling, your variables that you set up for yourself in advance can determine so much about how the production and how the visual unfolding of that idea really are realized. So there's no wonder why, when it comes to looking at like a broad look at all the indigenous science fictions that I have made, the first one takes place entirely in the nomadic frontier.
Right. Yeah.
Where Mother Nature's all around us. Did that cost anything? No. And is that really important? I don't think so.
No.
Now, when it comes to navigating the near present, because of course that's a very important time era, especially considering today. In this case, it was certainly a challenge when it came to navigating the locations and what does that near future world 10 years from now look like, and not just creating the look, but also giving a sense of meaning as to if things were to go off the rails. And so in terms, some of the locations that we used for the film, they had to be very specific. They had to represent what the idea was about. Some of them existed in and around Western Canada, but when it comes to high-tech futuristic environments, a lot of them simply didn't exist. And so we needed to build this world in terms of having 5-walled rooms or hexagon-shaped rooms that gave us a different sort of dynamic and look to science fiction. So overall, when it comes to navigating them with your resources, I always look at them as here's what we have. And the most important thing is always the story and the concept because of the genre.
Well, and I mean, and I think that's like at least partly for me what really stands out about the film, because it's steeped in a lot of the sci-fi lore, but at the same time it's steeped in a lot of cultural lore, and it's not trying to hit us over the head with either one. It's focusing on sort of the core emotion of what's happening to these characters. And I mean, for you, when you're sort of heading into something, is that for you, is that the core, is that the crux, or is it trying to sort of build worlds beyond that?
I think at a deepest level, I think that the emotional experience of these characters in these time eras is really what fascinates me from a performance point of view. As a former actor who switched and became a director storyteller, I can empathize with these characters and always seek to try to understand what they would feel and where they would stand morally, certainly morally, in the world that they're navigating, because every world is very different. So I find that there's often really interesting and complex feelings that can be surfaced through discussions that I'll have with the actors and being open to their ideas and thoughts in the moment. But certainly with working with the actors and also having them interpret the script, it's often a very interesting and vulnerable place that I like to go when I work with those actors.
When you're writing something, do you think your experience as an actor sort of informs that? Because I mean, like I say, on sci-fi films, sometimes we'll get stories that where people are building the spectacle and then worrying about the story, but this really is about the story, and then the spectacle kind of comes out of that, and it's really very sort of beautifully nuanced, and it's very really sort of well shot and makes it all feel seamless, as opposed to thinking, oh, okay, well, now here's something, or now here's something else to distract my eye. It really gets down to sort of, I guess, as an actor, it's an actor's kind of film.
Yeah, well, to be honest, you have a good point with how sci-fi is it's often very big picture concept, where you're dealing with time, or you're dealing with different control systems, and you certainly have the obligation and the responsibility, and it's a good responsibility to explore those politics and those features of the world you're creating with your characters. And so I think giving the actors that ability to emotionally explore in those environments is it's for them, it's a very liberating experience. But in terms of stepping back out and talking about the big picture here with the themes that the film navigates, I'm quite fascinated between the time of writing the film up to releasing the film, how much has certainly changed in the world around us in regard to the very messages that the film is presenting. So it was, since creating the story, I mean, for me it all started where I kind of felt that as a storyteller I owed a story to explore the idea of technological determinism.
Yeah.
And so I find that right now the encroachment by big tech needs to be addressed in the wake of this pandemic. And since this happening literally during the time of creating and releasing the film. I mean, it's something in terms of, you know, the outside world surrounding the topic of AI and control. It makes the topic and message just feel all the more immediate. And you know, about the AI in Parallel Minds in relation to the pandemic, it's important to keep our eyes open and find a balance where, you know, yes, wearing masks is good, obvious, no brainer, distancing, sanitizing, staying healthy, not going out in droves, all good. But on the other hand, when you are encouraged to share your GPS location on trackers, connect your bank account to the government to give them access, target advertisements, shutdowns of small businesses and not big businesses like Walmart or Canadian Tire, fast food, it's cause to wonder what controls are being attempted by whom digitally in our lives. And I mean, you know, not to breed cause for paranoia here, but be alert, be aware of what's happening around us. Parallel Minds, I mean, it goes deep into the mainframe of that discussion. Where does all this information or experiences, the triangulation of those experiences go? Where is it processed? Who processes it? What is the end goal for that AI, that entity or that AI, that algorithm that processes and redistributes the digital offerings of life, love, travel, envy, the drive for money, the drive for attention and self-satisfaction? What is the end goal of it, and what does it look like? So in terms of creating a character of this throughout most of the film, he's a shape-shifting entity, like a spirit, inspired by, you know, the concept of the trickster, which in traditional stories is a being that shapeshifts and you can't see what they're doing, and they take on various different forms. And so it's through that interpretation of the trickster and what they really look like was what fascinated me about giving an actual persona to an artificial intelligence.
You know, I find it fascinating because, I mean, like you say, it is this interesting character, and there is these developments, and I love how really, when you look at it, you can look at some of, like, so many traditionally told stories, no matter what the culture, and really with a little bit of creativity, they can be applied in a way that works in sort of very thoughtful science fiction, which I've always loved, but it's never always the easiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I think that, you know, it's one interpretation that, you know, kind of has it was sort of based on a couple of different understandings that I was researching. One of them was the toxic sludge pool, where, you know, there's parts of the world where all of the technology is made and produced, and that kind of area of the world, I won't say where, but that area of the world, you know, to me, it's the reality of the very the core, or I wouldn't say the nexus or the mainframe, but it's, in a way, it's not entirely pretty. I mean, what we're presented with is the end result, the polished package that's very appealing and tantalizing. But, you know, it certainly begs questions of the underbelly, the epicenter, and in that epicenter, who is processing it? Why is it being processed the way it is? And what is the end goal of that entity, whatever it is? If it's, you know, the entity governing all the social media and the AI algorithms of target marketing, what does that look like? And giving a shape and a face to that. And, you know, on the other side of the equation with you know, as an Indigenous science fiction, blood, you know, I want to talk about real blood, because, you know, blood in the Snow Festival. So we owe a conversation about blood here. You know what, what I have to say, Indigenous nations have endured a lot of blood and shedding in the past. Take residential schools, missing and murdered Indigenous women, the famous Battle of Batoche and the fight for freedom. And this is a case where the mind and spirit of the people of the land have a fundamental connection to the ancestors. And in that case, it's the main character, Margot Elson, and her relationship with Kukum, and her ancestor Kukum, who's, you know, it's the ancestors who are literally a part of the conversation with us all the time, and literally they're addressed in the room where we are. I mean, right now you and me are in two different rooms, but the ancestor is still present in the room, and wondering what would they say, you know. And what they might say is not to let the world run us out on the freedoms and the experiences and the dreams that we as humans control as humans, and not letting a trickster AI spirit take that away from you, because you're a human being, you have sovereignty, you are blood, and so is the ancestor, not an AI. You know, I always think of Ian Holmes' milky white blood from Alien, you know, these binary entities, these integrated network spirits. They don't have that vulnerable humanity that we have, the empathy of the human heart, and the lifeblood that drives us all to understand and have life and contribute in a mortal way to the world around us. So if you ask what blood I'm bringing to the Blood in the Snow Festival, that's the blood I'm bringing.
You know, and I mean, it shows, because it's really a story. It's really such a, even though it's a sci-fi setting, it is such a humanistic story, and that comes through in the performances in the film. And I mean, I guess my next question for you is, can you walk me through not just sort of the pains I'm sure you went through in casting as being an actor yourself, but also just how much time did you get to have to work with everyone to sort of get everything to mesh? Because I was really very impressed on how sort of well everyone sort of understood the sort of the emotional level of the material.
Thank you. To be honest, you know, it's been the case in other projects I've done where I've been directing and I have had rehearsal time, and it's valuable, especially with characters who are, you know, in maybe 3 scenes, and you have to kind of position them so they understand what's going on for them in relation to the big picture of the whole. That's usually where I approach it with actors. Is I like to always give them that emotional context and convey to them who, you know, whose perception is the scene really about, and if I have that time with them. But I didn't. In the case of Parallel Minds, it was all right then, right there on the day, examining them and kind of walking up to them after take after take, and being the emotional coach, so to speak, with them, and understanding and presenting the facts and details of the story. And also, you know, being a mystery plot, this is the case where you have a lot of characters, and there's certain elements of the story and the conflict that are revealing themselves like a layer by layer, like an onion, and there's only so much that they know or can't know. And especially when you shoot a movie all out of sequence, for economy, you know, I had to really make sure that the characters were aware of only as much as they needed to be up to that point in the script.
For sure. Okay. No, I mean, I love that you did that like that, because it really does give sort of an immediacy to it. And I mean, I guess my next question is and we got to give Blood in the Snow a little bit more love here, because if people don't know or listen, Blood in the Snow is a genre festival, and there are so many sort of advances and sort of risks that get taken in genre filmmaking as opposed to other filmmakers. I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, how important is it to sort of not just be a part of a festival like this, but to be able to sort of work in genre and be able to sort of push boundaries like Parallel Minds kind of does?
Right. To be honest, I find that you can really tell the quality of a festival by virtue of its programming across the whole slate of its programming. And you know, to my very pleasant surprise, the program for this year's Blood in the Snow festival is completely incredible. And I always knew Blood in the Snow was a very strong artistic, but also boundary pushing institution, I'll call it.
Yeah.
One that, you know, year after year is after not only the best, but also the ones that contribute and have something to say, and are well made. And some festivals around the world are most concerned about star marquee value, and that's what they prioritize. You know, maybe it's putting bums in seats. But when it comes to genre film, I find it's a perfect avenue to navigate, being progressive with ideas that can cause change while being commercial at the same time, and still have, you know, actors who really can sink their teeth and give a great performance and are known. Like take Nick Cage and Mandy, for example.
Right.
It's a perfect balance where, you know, you have a film that can really explore something raw and visceral, and yet at the same time is you know, has a really good actor that is well known. So I find genre film, science fiction and fantasy and all those are able to really you know, navigate and push the tropes. And so Blood in the Snow, you know, even this year with the pandemic, you know, I was so impressed by how quickly they pivoted and made the festival available across the country, which, to be honest, I find, you know, wonderful, because, you know, people have access all over to watch the film. I mean, you can only have 300 or 400 seats in a theater, but on television, you know, you're limitless. You've got 10,000 or even 100,000 possible viewers who can all be in the virtual theater watching the film festival. So my hat's off to Blood in the Snow tremendously for making these arrangements and actually being really present and actually you know, getting the word out as a festival, and doing a lot of boots on the ground work that they've done. So I commend them.
Well, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's about getting an audience for films and for filmmakers, which is, you know, why you're making these stories in the first place. Am I right?
Yes. Yes, and you know, they do a wonderful job with being in touch with us and having all these different initiatives and arranging for conversations like this. So I'm very quite impressed with what Blood in the Snow has done this year. And yeah, like I said, it's an institution I definitely hope and will strive for being a part of for years to come.
Now, I'm kind of curious, what pushed you to want to move into sort of that director's chair? Because I mean, there's the old joke that every actor wants to direct and every director wants to act, but what was it for you that made you want to make the switch?
Well, it was sort of a culmination of looking at a real desire to through artistry and through storytelling, convey stories and tell stories. And there came a point where I realized that the most effective way to do that would be to step behind the camera and tell the stories and create those memorable roles and characters that I wish I would have been offered as an actor. And I decided to become that voice of story that would give those souls a life of their own. And so, you know, when it comes to creating like an ensemble of cast for the various different films that I've done, in the case of Parallel Minds, I really liked having an interesting balance of characters where you have, you know, you have a very intelligent researcher that's really integrated within what they would call the corporate technological industry,
Right.
versus someone like a rogue renegade cyber hacker who works with like a lot of old and antiquated technology and tech, you know, in her warehouse. And so yeah. So you can, and the same thing with you know, having a detective that is, you know, he's so old school that he evades the AI spirit and trickster, drives an old car because they can't track him, and kind of, yeah, creating those kinds of balances of cast is always, for me, you know, from an actor's perspective, I appreciate and I have a very fond time, you know, as I say, being in the room with these actors, I have to spend, half a year or a little more of my life with all of these people, that I'm writing a story for. And then when I meet them, I'm very familiar with these actors. Like, why has Ben so familiar with us? It's like, well, I worked with you for about 8 months. I was writing you.
And I mean, it also speaks to sort of the impermanence of the business as well, because if you're not trying to play different characters, if you're not trying to write and tell not only different stories, but the stories that you want to tell, then it's even that much more of a challenge to last in this business.
Interesting. Well, I think that, the quest for a storyteller, if you're out there in the world, is to always probe in new ways the conversations that are important and meaningful for your time, and to explore them obviously in a new original way. So, it's no wonder that originality is always a very important consideration of any film when it comes to how a script is how a script conveys the story, or the originality of the world that's being created. So that's what I really appreciate about being a Canadian storyteller, who, in this country, we're given a great ability to tell stories that are pushing the envelope and are progressive with the conversation.
Do you see yourself going forward as a storyteller who would primarily work in sort of sci-fi and these kind of genres, or is there a romantic comedy in your future, or is there a straight drama in your future? Do you think?
Well, again, I've always, when I look at, into my past, I've always been driven by looking at the world around us, and whether that's the status quo or the future, or looking at the past. And so in terms of those big picture things, I often, that's just the world that I've always been in as a I consider it being like a remote observer, removed from the world, to look at possibilities of other places. So it's no wonder that my next 2 and 3 screenplays that are currently supported in development by Telefilm Canada, Canada Media Fund, all of them are science fiction or fantasy or action adventure. You'd call them those genres, but I would just call them, stories that explore different eras of time, and science fiction and fantasy tropes through an Indigenous lens.
Now, as I always say in this business, we've always come to it as fans first. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, not only as an actor, but as a director as well, can you boil it down to like one movie or one moment where it sort of clicked for you and you went, okay, this is what I want to do?
You know what? It was 2011, watching Pan's Labyrinth. That was where it really clicked for me. I watched it, and I was, also in a position where I was studying the film and breaking it down, and watching that film really allowed me to realize that all of these different things that I had, explored in a very early capacity, like acting or even the tech of cameras and doing editing and storytelling through editing. All of those things, culminated at that one moment when I watched Pan's Labyrinth and witnessed, a very important story about, Mexico and the politics of what happened in that world at that time, and also seeing it done fantastically, so that you're inspired, but you also learn something at the same time. And so it was realizing that, okay, here's what performance is all about. Here's what using cameras and using camera placement and shot placement, and as a filmmaker, storyboarding things and breaking down a story into its skeleton, and storytelling in a very detailed way. All of those things really culminated at that very moment for me, and since then it was no looking back. It was just forward and progression into film.
Well, and I love that you say Pan's Labyrinth, because I mean, the second you said it, it clicked in my head, because I mean, I can see some similar parallels with Parallel Minds, because it's this emotional, very human story, but it's telling it's delivering a message and telling us something on a much grander scale that we kind of need to sort of be aware of and sort of have cognizant in our lives. And I think that's what good, not just science fiction will do, but good storytelling does. And I just want to thank you again for the film, and thank you for the time today. This was great.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate having our conversation, and all the best with the rest of the festival, Blood in the Snow, and thanks for chatting. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, man.